They said the baby was fine. They said the tests were normal. They said not to worry. But every day, the Mafia boss's baby grew.
The baby was crying again when Luca Moretti finally lost his patience. It wasn't a loud cry. It never was. That was what unsettled him most. It was thin, strained, as if even crying required more strength than the child had left. Luca stood in the doorway of the private hospital room, tailored black suit untouched by the antiseptic air, watching his son's tiny chest rise and fall, too fast, too shallow. He was fed an hour ago, the doctor said calmly, flipping through a chart. Some babies are simply delicate. Delicate. Luca's jaw tightened. Nothing in his world was delicate. Men feared him because he never accepted weakness, especially excuses. Yet here he was, helpless, staring at a child who seemed to be shrinking by the day. The baby's mother, Sophia, sat rigidly in the chair beside the crib. She hadn't slept. It showed in the hollow beneath her eyes, in the way she clutched the edge of the blanket like it might slip away if she loosened her grip. When the doctor spoke, she didn't argue. She rarely did anymore. But she watched the baby constantly. Too constantly. He was born strong, she said quietly, finally lifting her eyes. He cried loud the first night. He drank everything they gave him. The doctor smiled in that distant, professional way. Babies change. Stress. Environment. These things. He's losing weight. Sophia interrupted, her voice steady but sharp underneath. Every day. The doctor sighed. A few grams here and there isn't unusual. Luca stepped forward then, his shadow falling across the crib. The baby whimpered, fist trembling weakly in the air. Luca had faced guns without blinking, ordered men into graves with a nod, but this sight made something twist painfully in his chest. Fix it, he said. Not loudly. He didn't need to. The doctor swallowed and nodded. We'll run more tests. After they left, silence flooded the room. Machines hummed softly. The city lights glowed beyond the window, distant and tearing. Sophia stood and leaned over the crib, brushing a finger against the baby's cheek. Her touch was gentle, reverent, like she was afraid the child might vanish under her hand. Luca, she said without turning, something is wrong. He didn't answer right away. He hated that feeling uncertainty. Doctors know what they're doing. She finally looked at him then. Really looked. They don't see him the way I do. That night, after Luca left to attend to business he refused to postpone, Sophia stayed awake. She counted breaths. She memorized every tiny sound. When the nurse came in for the late check, Sophia was already standing. The nurse was young. Her badge read Elena Rossi, and unlike the others, she didn't rush. She paused beside the crib longer than necessary, eyes narrowing slightly. He looks smaller, Elena murmured, more to herself than to Sophia. Sophia's heart jumped. You see it too. Elena hesitated. Nurses weren't supposed to question doctors, especially not in a hospital funded by men like Luca Moretti. But she leaned closer, gently adjusting the feeding tube, watching the baby's reaction. Or lack of one. Has he been finishing his feeds? Elena asked. They say he is, Sophia replied, but he cries afterward, like he's still hungry. Elena frowned. She checked the chart, then the equipment, then the baby again. She didn't speak for a long moment. This might sound strange, she said carefully, lowering her voice, but sometimes it's not about how much a baby is given. It's about what they can actually take in. Sophia's breath caught. What does that mean? Before Elena could answer, the baby's cry broke cut short into a weak, breathless sound. Elena moved instantly, lifting him with practiced ease. She noticed something then. A tiny detail, a reflex that didn't happen when it should have. Her face changed. I need to check something, she said. Properly. Call the doctor, Sophia said, panic rising. Elena shook her head. Not yet. She carried the baby to the light, watching the way he swallowed, the way his throat worked or didn't. Her hands trembled slightly now. This isn't normal, she whispered. Sophia felt the room tilt. Then what is it? Elena looked at the child again, then at Sophia, fear flickering behind her professionalism. I think everyone's been looking at the numbers, she said, and missing the reason. Down the hall, Luca's footsteps echoed as he returned unexpectedly, drawn back by something he couldn't name. As he reached the door, he heard voices urgent, hushed. And for the first time since his son was born, Luca Moretti felt a fear he couldn't threaten away. Luca stopped just short of the doorway. The sight inside froze him where he stood. The nurse had his son in her arms, angled toward the light, her expression no longer neutral or careful. It was tight, focused, almost afraid. Sofia stood close, one hand covering her mouth, the other braced against the crib, as if the floor itself had gone unsteady. "What's going on?" Luca asked. His voice was calm, but it carried weight. The room felt smaller the moment he spoke. Elena turned. For a split second, her eyes flicked to his suit, his posture, the unmistakable aura of a man who did not ask questions lightly. She swallowed. "Sir," she said, choosing her words carefully, "your son is struggling to swallow." The doctor's words from earlier echoed in Luca's head. Delicate. Stress. Environment. He took a step closer, gaze locked on the baby's face. The child's lips were slightly blue now, breath fluttering like a trapped bird. "He's been fed," Luca said flatly. "Yes," Elena replied. "But that doesn't mean he's been nourished." Sofia's knees buckled. She caught herself before she fell. "I told them," she whispered. "I told them something was wrong." Elena adjusted her grip, angling the baby again. "Watch his throat," she said to Luca, as if he were any other father. "When he swallows, it doesn't complete." Luca leaned in, despite himself. He saw it then. The tiny hesitation, the way the baby strained worked, failed again and again. Milk residue clung at the corner of his mouth. Not enough was going down. Not enough ever had. "Why wasn't this noticed?" Luca asked. No one answered him. Elena lowered the baby back into the crib, gentler than she had ever been with anything in her life. "Some conditions don't show up on routine tests," she said quietly, "especially if no one's looking for them." Sofia stared at the ceiling, blinking back tears. "So he's been starving," she said. It wasn't a question. Elena nodded once. Slowly, something dark and cold unfurled in Luca's chest. Not rage, not yet. Something worse. Guilt, heavy and unfamiliar. He had ordered men broken for less than this kind of negligence. "I want the head pediatrician," he said. "Now." Elena hesitated. "Sir, if we move too fast, they'll defend themselves. We need proof. I need permission to run a specialized swallow study." "How long?" "A few hours. Maybe less." Sofia grabbed Luca's sleeve, her fingers trembling. "Please," she said. "Let her." Luca looked down at her hand, at how small it looked gripping him, how desperate. He nodded once. "Do it." Elena exhaled, relief flashing across her face, before professionalism snapped back into place. She moved quickly now, adjusting monitors, making notes. As she stepped out to arrange the test, Sofia sank into the chair, finally breaking. Her shoulders shook silently. Luca stood there, useless, watching the woman he had once loved unravel in front of him. "This wouldn't have happened," she said hoarsely, "if you'd been here." The words hit harder than any bullet ever had. "I was here," he said, too sharply. "Not like this," she replied, gesturing weakly at the crib. "You were always somewhere else. Power. Fear. I was alone when he stopped crying loudly. Alone when the nurses told me not to worry. Alone when I started counting his ribs." Luca didn't defend himself. He couldn't. He moved closer to the crib, staring down at his son's face. The baby's eyes fluttered open briefly. For a second they met Luca's, and then the child turned his head away, exhausted. Something inside Luca fractured. Hours later, the test results came back. Elena stood at the foot of the bed, holding a tablet with hands that no longer shook. "It's a rare swallowing disorder," she said. "Fixable. Treatable, but it needs immediate intervention. A feeding adjustment, therapy, care." Sofia let out a broken sob of relief. Luca closed his eyes. "How close were we?" he asked. Elena didn't answer right away. Then softly, too close. That night, Luca sat alone in the dim hospital room after Sofia finally slept. He rested a finger against his son's tiny hand. It wrapped weakly around him. For the first time in decades, Luca Moretti prayed not for power, not for control, but for time. And down the hall, Alina filled out her report, knowing she had just crossed a line that powerful men didn't like crossed, and that this story was only beginning. The hospital changed its tone overnight. By morning, the room was fuller, quieter in a different way. New equipment had been wheeled in. A specialist arrived from another wing, careful with his words, overly polite with Luca, eyes avoiding his for just a second too long. Feeding protocols were adjusted. Tubes repositioned. The baby slept for longer stretches, his breathing steadier now, though still fragile. Sophia watched every movement like a hawk. She barely spoke. When she did, it was only to ask questions no one else thought to ask about reflux, about pain, about whether he was scared when he couldn't swallow. The doctors answered clinically. Alina answered like a human being. Luca noticed. He noticed the way Alina crouched to Sophia's eye level when she spoke. The way she explained without rushing. The way she stayed a few seconds longer than required, every time, just to make sure the baby settled after each feed. She shouldn't be here this much, one of the senior nurses muttered under her breath outside the room. Luca heard it. He remembered it. By the third day, the baby gained a few grams. It wasn't much, but it was something. Sophia cried when the scale confirmed it, pressing her forehead to the glass of the incubator like she was thanking it. Luca stood behind her, hands in his pockets, feeling like an intruder in his own child's life. He hadn't always been. He remembered Sophia before the silence between them, before the fights that ended without resolution, before she told him she was pregnant and he told her it wasn't the right time. He hadn't said no. He hadn't said yes either. In Luca Moretti's world, hesitation was often as cruel as rejection. She left 2 weeks later. When she came back months after the birth, pale, exhausted, carrying a baby that barely cried, he told himself it was fate correcting itself. He hadn't asked enough questions then either. That regret sat heavy now. Late one evening, as the city outside dissolved into rain and neon, Alina entered the room quietly. Sophia was asleep in the chair, her head tilted awkwardly, one hand still threaded through the crib bars. Luca stood by the window, phone dark in his hand. He took more tonight, Alina whispered. Luca turned. How much? Enough, she said. Then hesitated. For now. He studied her face. You saved him. Alina stiffened. I did my job. No, Luca said. You did more than that. She didn't respond. She checked the monitors, adjusted a blanket, then moved to leave. Why didn't you tell the doctors sooner? Luca asked quietly. Alina stopped with her back to him. The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Because sometimes, she said slowly, when you work in places like this, you learn that questioning authority doesn't make you popular. Especially when powerful people are involved. Luca understood power. He also understood fear. You won't be punished, he said. She turned then, meeting his eyes for the first time without flinching. That's not always up to you. Something in her tone unsettled him. The next morning, the head pediatrician arrived with an apology that sounded rehearsed. Words like rare, unpredictable, no fault were used liberally. Luca listened without expression. Afterward, he made a call, then another. By afternoon, 2 doctors were reassigned. Quietly, permanently. Sophia noticed the shift immediately. What did you do? She asked him when they were alone. Nothing that affects our son, Luca replied. She studied him. You can't control everything. I know, he said. That's the problem. That evening, Alina didn't come in. Another nurse took her place. Competent, polite, distant. Sophia's unease returned instantly. She tried not to show it. But Luca saw her fingers tightening around the blanket, the way her eyes kept drifting to the door. Where's Alina? Sophia asked. The nurse smiled. She's been reassigned. To where? Another floor. Sophia looked at Luca. You promised. I didn't touch her, he said sharply. Then softer. I didn't. But when he stepped into the hall later, searching, Alina wasn't on any floor. Her locker was empty. That night, the baby refused his feed. He cried harder than he had in days, his tiny face turning red with effort. The new nurse followed protocol. The monitors beeped louder. Sophia panicked. This isn't right, she said. She did something different. Elena, she knew. Luca felt the old fear claw back into his chest. As alarms began to draw staff into the room, Luca stared down the hallway, a single thought pounding through his mind. The one person who truly saw his son was gone, and he had no idea why. The alarms stopped as suddenly as they had started. A senior nurse rushed in, took over with calm efficiency, adjusted the feeding angle, slowed the flow. The baby's cries softened into exhausted hiccups. His breathing steadied again. Crisis averted, but only barely. Sophia sank back into the chair, shaking. This shouldn't have happened, she whispered. We were past this. Luca stood rigid, fists clenched at his sides. He knew that sound, the edge of disaster brushing past without fully arriving. He had heard it in gunfire that missed by inches, in deals that almost collapsed. This was worse. This was his child. When the room finally cleared, Luca stepped into the hallway and made calls he hadn't wanted to make. Quiet calls, the kind that didn't show up in records. Names were checked, schedules reviewed, reassignments questioned. Elena Rossi hadn't just been moved. She'd been reported. By who? Luca asked into the phone, his voice low. There was a pause on the other end. Then a complaint was filed. Said she was overstepping, undermining doctors, creating panic. Luca closed his eyes. Where is she now? Administrative leave. Pending review. Who filed it? Another pause, longer this time. One of the attending physicians. Luca ended the call without another word. Inside the room, Sophia was pacing now, rubbing her arms as if she were cold. They punished her, she said when he returned. Didn't they? He didn't lie. Yes. Her face crumpled, not in anger, worse. In disappointment. She helped us, Sophia said. She helped him. She will be protected. Luca replied, though the words felt thin even as he said them. Sophia stopped pacing. You don't understand, she said quietly. She wasn't just following instructions. She noticed things. Little things. She listened to me when no one else did. Luca looked at his son. The baby slept now, mouth slightly open, chest rising and falling with fragile rhythm. Too many people had looked at him and seen numbers. Elena had looked and seen a child. I'll fix it, Luca said. Sophia shook her head. This isn't about fixing. It's about trust. That night, Luca didn't leave the hospital. He sat in the corner chair, jacket draped over the back, watching shadows move across the walls as nurses came and went. Every sound felt louder in the dark. Every pause felt dangerous. Sometime after midnight, the baby stirred. Not crying, just restless. Luca stood immediately, moving closer, heart in his throat. He watched as his son's tiny hand flailed weakly, fingers searching for something. Without thinking, Luca slipped his finger into the crib. The baby latched onto it, grip surprisingly firm for someone so small. Luca froze. No one had ever held onto him like that. Not without fear. Not without wanting something in return. This was instinct, need, trust, however fragile. His throat tightened. I'm here, he murmured, the words unfamiliar in his mouth. I'm here. The baby's grip loosened as he drifted back into sleep. Luca sat back down, shaken. In the early hours of the morning, Sophia woke and found him still there. She studied him for a long moment before speaking. You didn't used to stay, she said. I didn't know how, he replied honestly. She nodded once. Neither did I. Later that day, Luca found Elena. Not in the hospital, in a small cafe 2 blocks away, sitting alone at a corner table, untouched coffee cooling in front of her. She looked smaller out of uniform, younger, tired in a way that had nothing to do with long shifts. She stiffened when she saw him. I'm not here to threaten you, Luca said, holding up a hand, or to silence you. Elena's laugh was short and humorless. That's usually what powerful men say, right before they do exactly that. He sat across from her anyway. I need you. Her eyes narrowed. You don't get to say that. My son does, Luca replied. And so does his mother. Elena looked away, jaw tight. I did what I thought was right. And now I'm paying for it. You shouldn't have to, Luca said. Come back. I'll make sure. No, she interrupted. That's the problem. I don't want protection. I want them to admit they were wrong. Luca leaned back, studying her. They won't. Not willingly. Elena met his gaze. Then maybe you finally understand how this feels. Something in her words landed deep. He did understand. Too late, perhaps, but he understood. Back at the hospital, Sophia waited. When Luca returned alone, she knew before he spoke. She won't come back, Sophia said. No, he agreed. The baby fussed softly in the crib, the monitors blinking steadily. Sophia leaned over him, whispering reassurances through tears she refused to wipe away. Luca stood behind her, watching both of them, a realization settling heavily in his chest. He couldn't control this. He couldn't threaten it away. And for the first time, Luca Moretti understood that saving his son might require him to change in ways power never had. The change didn't come all at once. It came in fragments, small, unsettling moments that forced Luca to sit with discomfort instead of bulldozing through it. The baby's feeding plan stabilized, but progress was slow. Every gram gained felt like a victory. Every pause on the scale felt like a quiet threat. Sophia lived between hope and terror, never fully resting in either. Luca stayed. At first, people assumed it was temporary, a show of concern. The kind of presence powerful men made when they wanted to be seen. But days passed, then a week, and he was still there. Same chair, same corner, same dark circles forming under his eyes. He learned the rhythms of the ward. Which nurse hummed while she worked? Which one avoided eye contact? Which machines made harmless noises? And which ones meant something was wrong? He learned how Sophia took her coffee black, untouched half the time. He learned that his son calmed faster when spoken to softly, not rocked too hard. He learned things no one had ever taught him. One afternoon, as rain streaked the windows again, Sophia finally broke the silence that had grown comfortable between them. You can leave, she said. Not unkindly. You don't have to prove anything. Luca didn't look up from the crib. I'm not proving. She watched him for a moment. Then what are you doing? He hesitated, trying not to disappear again. That earned his gaze. Her eyes searched his face, looking for the arrogance she had once known so well. It wasn't there. What she saw instead unsettled her more: uncertainty, fear, a man stripped of certainty. I was angry for a long time, she said quietly. Not because you were cruel, but because you were absent without admitting it. I know, Luca said. I told myself I was protecting you, protecting him. But really, I was protecting myself. The baby stirred between them, making a small, breathy sound. Sophia reached down, instinctive. Luca watched her hand steady him, the way she always seemed to know what he needed before he did. You missed a lot, she said. I know, Luca repeated. The word tasted different this time. That evening, Luca received a call from one of his men, a routine matter. Something that would have once pulled him out of the hospital without a second thought. I can't, Luca said after listening, handle it without me. There was a pause. Are you sure? Yes. He hung up before doubt could creep in. Later, alone in the corridor, he leaned against the wall and exhaled shakily. Power had always felt like control. Tonight, letting go felt heavier than holding on ever had. The next morning brought news. The hospital administration requested a meeting. Sophia's shoulders tensed when Luca told her. They're scared, she said. They should be, he replied. Then, seeing her expression, he softened. I won't hurt them. That's not what scares me, Sophia said. I don't want him to grow up surrounded by fear. The meeting was sterile, polite, apologetic without admitting fault. Luca listened, hands folded, eyes cold but not threatening. When they finished, he spoke calmly. You failed my son, he said, and you punished the person who saved him. There was shuffling, excuses, policies cited. I don't want revenge, Luca continued. I want change, training, accountability. And Nurse Elena Rossi reinstated, with her record cleared. One administrator cleared. His throat. That may take time. Luca smiled faintly. You have a week. Outside the room, Sophia waited. How did it go? She asked. They'll do it, Luca said. She studied him. You didn't threaten them. I didn't need to. That night, the baby fed better than he had all week. He finished slowly, without distress, eyes fluttering closed afterward. Sophia laughed through tears, pressing her lips to his forehead. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Luca nodded, unable to speak. Later, when Sophia slept, Luca sat with his son again. He watched the tiny rise and fall of his chest, the faint movement of his fingers. "I don't know how to be what you need," he murmured, "but I'm going to learn." The baby shifted, making a small sound that might have been nothing or everything. Across the city, Elena Rossi checked her phone for the 10th time that day. There was a missed call from a number she didn't recognize. When she finally listened to the voicemail, her breath caught. "Ms. Rossi," the voice said, "professional and careful. This is hospital administration. We'd like to discuss your return." Elena sank into her chair, stunned. Back in the hospital room, Luca felt his phone buzz. He didn't look at it right away. He was watching his son sleep, memorizing the peace on his face. For the first time, Luca Moretti wasn't thinking about what he could take from the world. He was thinking about what he might still be allowed to give. Elena returned 3 days later, not quietly, not triumphantly, just present. She walked into the ward in her familiar pale blue uniform, hair pulled back, posture straight but cautious. The nurses at the desk looked up, surprised. One offered a tight smile, another quickly looked away. Sophia saw her first. She was mid-sentence, speaking softly to her son, when she froze. Her breath caught, and then she was on her feet before she fully realized it. "Elena," she said, voice breaking. Elena stopped short, emotion flickering across her face before she reined it in. "Hi," she said gently. "I heard he's doing better." Sophia crossed the room and hugged her without asking. It wasn't neat or restrained. It was the kind of hug that came from days of fear with nowhere to put it. Elena stiffened for a second, then relaxed, one hand resting awkwardly on Sophia's back. "He is," Sophia said into her shoulder, "because of you." Luca stood back, watching. Elena met his eyes over Sophia's shoulder. There was no gratitude there, no warmth, just acknowledgement. He nodded once. It was enough. From that day on, the ward felt different. Elena didn't hover. She didn't challenge openly. But she watched. She adjusted feeds with subtle precision. She reminded doctors of symptoms they dismissed before. She documented everything carefully now, twice over. No one questioned her. The baby Matteo, Sophia had finally insisted on calling him by name out loud, began to change. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. His cheeks filled out just a little. His cries gained strength. His eyes stayed open longer, tracking movement, lingering on faces. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled across the floor, Matteo wrapped his fingers around Luca's thumb again. This time he didn't let go. Sophia saw it. Her chest tightened. "He knows you now," she said quietly. Luca didn't respond. He couldn't. The simple truth of it lodged too deep. That evening, Sophia finally left the hospital for a few hours. Elena had insisted. "Go shower," she'd said firmly. "Eat real food. He's safe." Luca stayed. The room was dim, the city outside glowing in scattered reflections. Elena moved with practiced ease, checking lines, making notes. "You didn't have to do what you did," she said suddenly, not looking at him. "I know," Luca replied. Elena turned. "Why did you?" He thought about it longer than he expected to. "Because I've spent my life fixing problems by removing them. And this time, the problem was me." She studied him, skeptical but listening. "I didn't listen," he continued. "I didn't stay. And my son almost paid for it." Elena's expression softened just slightly. "Awareness is a start," she said. "It's not redemption. I'm not asking for that." "Good," she said, "because children don't need redeemed fathers. They need present ones." The words landed cleanly. No accusation, no mercy either. Later that night, when the ward quieted, Luca received another call. This one he answered. "Your people are restless," the voice said. "They're noticing you're not around." Luca watched Matteo sleep. "They'll adjust. And if they don't?" "Then they were never loyal," Luca said, and ended the call. Power, he was learning, had a sound. It was loud, demanding, constant. Love was quieter. But it asked for more. The following week, Matteo was moved out of intensive care. Sofia cried openly when it happened. Elena smiled. Luca felt something loosen in his chest that he hadn't known was knotted. They stood together in the new room, brighter, warmer, less haunted by machines. Sofia placed Matteo in the crib, lingering there longer than necessary. "We're getting closer," she said. "To what?" Luca asked. "To the world," she replied. "To real life." The words scared him more than any threat ever had. Real life meant choices, consequences, time that couldn't be controlled or reclaimed. That night, Sofia spoke the question she'd been holding back. "What happens when we leave here?" she asked. Luca didn't pretend not to understand. "Whatever you want." She shook her head. "That's not an answer." He took a breath. "I want to be his father," he said. "Not in name, not in shadow. In reality." Sofia studied him. "And the life you live?" "I'm changing it." She almost laughed. "You don't change a life like yours. You exit it. Or it drags you back." Luca nodded. "I know." Silence settled between them, heavy but honest. Across the room, Matteo stirred, making a small, determined sound. Sofia went to him immediately. Luca followed. They stood there together, hands resting on the crib's edge, watching their son breathe stronger now, fuller, alive. For the first time, the future didn't feel like something Luca could conquer. It felt like something he might finally have to earn. Leaving the hospital felt unreal. The doors slid open with a quiet hiss, and suddenly the air was different, colder, sharper, carrying the smell of traffic and rain-soaked pavement. Sofia paused just outside, Matteo bundled tightly against her chest, his tiny hat slightly crooked. She looked down at him as if expecting the world to change him the moment they crossed the threshold. Luca watched her hesitate. "It's okay," he said softly. "We're right here." She nodded, though her shoulders stayed tense. The hospital had been terrifying, but it had also been controlled. Out here, everything felt exposed. The car waited at the curb, black, discreet, driven by a man Luca trusted with his life. Matteo slept through the transfer, his breathing steady, warm against Sofia's heart. Luca opened the door for her, shielding them both from the drizzle with his coat without thinking. It struck him then how instinctive that felt. The drive was quiet. Sofia stared out the window, watching the city slide by restaurants, corner stores, people laughing under umbrellas. Ordinary life. A life she had once imagined sharing with Luca before reality had torn that dream apart. Luca noticed her grip tightening around Matteo. "We don't have to go to my place," he said. "I prepared another house, quiet, secure. No staff unless you ask." She turned, surprised. "You thought about that?" "Yes. Not because it was strategic, because she would have needed it." The house was smaller than Luca's primary residence, still elegant, still guarded, but softer somehow. Fewer sharp edges. Warm light. No reminders of power hanging on the walls. Elena had helped plan the discharge. Feeding schedules, emergency numbers, notes written in her neat, precise handwriting. She had looked Sofia in the eye and said, "Call me if anything feels wrong, even if you think it's silly." Sofia clung to that. The first night was hard. Matteo struggled to settle, unfamiliar with the quiet. Sofia paced the bedroom, whispering reassurances, tears slipping down her face in the dark. Luca hovered uselessly in the doorway until she finally snapped, "If you're going to stand there, at least come help." He did, awkwardly at first. Too stiff, too careful, but he followed her instructions, learned how to support Matteo's head, how to angle the bottle just right. When Matteo finally slept, Luca sat on the floor beside the crib, back against the wall, refusing to move. Sofia watched him from the bed, exhaustion blurring her vision. She didn't know when she fell asleep. Morning light crept in slowly. Matteo woke hungry and fed without panic. Sofia laughed, breathless with relief, and Luca felt the sound settle into him, something bright and fragile. But the world outside hadn't forgotten who Luca Moretti was. By afternoon, the calls started. Business partners, old allies, men who spoke in coded concern. "You've been quiet," one said. "People are asking questions." Luca ended the call and stared at his phone. He felt the pull, that familiar gravity of power and expectation. Sophia noticed immediately. "You don't have to choose right now," she said carefully. He looked at her. "Yes, I do." That evening, Luca met his closest lieutenant alone. No weapons visible, no raised voices. "I'm stepping back," Luca said. The man frowned. For how long? For good. A beat of silence. Then disbelief. "You can't just walk away." Luca's eyes hardened. "Watch me." The man leaned forward. "You built this. Men will fight over what's left." "Then they were never listening," Luca replied. "Because this ends with me." It wasn't a clean exit. It never could be. But it was real. That night, Luca returned home to find Sophia asleep on the couch, Matteo curled against her chest. He stood there for a long time, watching them breathe in unison. He realized then what fear truly was: not losing power, not death. It was the thought of failing them again. And he swore, silently, that he wouldn't. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They crept in slowly, like cracks spreading beneath a polished floor. At first it was small things. Meetings cancelled, without explanation. Calls that went unanswered. Men Luca had known for years suddenly becoming difficult to reach. Sophia sensed it before he told her. She always had. "You're being cut out," she said one morning, rocking Matteo as he dozed against her shoulder. Luca watched his son's eyelids flutter, peaceful. "I'm being tested." "For what?" "To see if I'll come back." Sophia nodded. "And will you?" Luca didn't answer right away. He crossed the room and adjusted the blanket around Matteo, careful not to wake him. No, that certainty frightened him and steadied him. Matteo continued to gain weight slowly but surely. His cries were stronger now, his lungs learning what they were capable of. Sometimes he startled himself with the sound, and went quiet again, wide-eyed and confused. Sophia laughed every time, pressing kisses into his hair. "He's discovering himself," she said. Luca watched those moments like a man learning a foreign language, afraid he might mispronounce something important. He made mistakes, held Matteo too tightly once, hesitated when he should have acted. But he stayed. One afternoon Elena visited, not as a nurse, just as Elena. She stood in the doorway awkwardly, holding a small paper bag. "I brought soup," she said, "and I wanted to see how he's doing." Sophia smiled and ushered her in. Matteo was awake, lying on a blanket on the floor, staring intently at the movement of light on the ceiling. Elena knelt beside him, eyes soft. "He looks stronger," she said. "He is," Sophia replied. "Because of you." Elena shook her head. "Because of all of you." She glanced at Luca. He met her gaze without defensiveness that time. "Thank you," he said simply. It was the first time he'd ever thanked anyone without it being a transaction. That night, after Elena left, Sophia sat beside Luca on the couch. Matteo slept between them, tiny hand curled around the fabric of Luca's shirt. "You know this doesn't end neatly," she said. "I know. There will always be someone who wants what you had." "I know." She turned to him. "And if they come for you?" Luca looked down at his son. "Then I'll do what I should have done years ago. I'll choose differently." The test came sooner than expected. A man Luca had once trusted requested a meeting. Neutral ground. A restaurant Luca hadn't visited in years. Sophia didn't try to stop him. "Come back," she said quietly. "That's all I ask." He kissed Matteo's forehead before leaving, lingering there longer than necessary. The meeting was calm, polite, dangerous in its civility. "You can't just disappear," the man said over untouched plates. "Your name keeps things balanced." "My name almost killed my son," Luca replied. The man leaned back. "You think walking away cleans that?" "No," Luca said. "But staying guarantees it doesn't." There was a pause, then a soft, final warning. "If you don't control it, someone else will." Luca stood. "Then let them." He left without looking back. When he returned home, Sophia was waiting. She searched his face, reading what he wasn't saying. "It's done," he said. She exhaled, shaky. "Are we safe?" "For now," Luca admitted, "and I'll make sure it stays that way." Days turned into weeks. Life found a rhythm. Feedings, doctor visits. Walks in the early evening when the streets were quiet. Matteo began to smile small, unsteady expressions that felt like miracles every time. One evening, as Luca held him against his chest, Matteo made a sound that wasn't a cry. It was clumsy, half-formed, but unmistakably joyful. Sofia froze. "Did you hear that?" Luca nodded, throat tight. "Yes." Matteo did it again, louder this time, face scrunching in effort. Sofia laughed and cried at the same time. Luca closed his eyes, overwhelmed. That sound imperfect, raw meant survival, growth, a future that hadn't been guaranteed. Later that night, Luca sat alone in the darkened living room, Matteo asleep upstairs. He thought about the man he had been, the power he had wielded, the fear he had inspired. None of it compared to the weight of that small life upstairs. He knew the past would never fully release him. But for the first time, it didn't own him either, and that felt like freedom. The first real threat arrived quietly. No gunshots, no shouting. Just a folded envelope slipped through the gate one morning, resting on the stone like it belonged there. Luca saw it before anyone else did. He stood still for a long moment, the early light catching the faint imprint of his name. Sofia watched from the doorway. Matteo balanced on her hip. She didn't ask what it was. She didn't need to. "Is it starting?" she asked. Luca picked up the envelope. It was heavier than it looked. "It never really stops," he said. "It just changes shape." Inside was a single sheet of paper. No signature. No explanation. Just a reminder of old obligations, written in careful language, ending with one line that made Luca's chest tighten. "People don't walk away without consequences." Sofia felt it the moment he folded the paper back up. "We can leave," she said immediately. "Go somewhere else. Another country, another name." Luca shook his head. "Running would follow us forever." Matteo shifted against her, fussing softly. Sofia lowered her voice. "Then what do we do?" Luca crouched in front of them, resting his hands on Sofia's knees, forcing her to look at him. "We keep living. We don't hide. And I finish what I started." She searched his eyes. "Which is ending it cleanly." That afternoon, Luca made calls he had been avoiding, not to command, to release. He transferred assets, closed accounts, signed documents that severed ties piece by piece. Each signature felt like shedding a skin that had grown too tight. Not everyone accepted it. That night, a car idled too long at the corner of the street. Luca noticed. He always noticed. He waited until it drove off before allowing himself to breathe again. Sofia watched him closely now. The old tension had returned to his shoulders, but something else was different. He didn't disappear into it. He stayed present. When Matteo cried, Luca was there. When Sofia's fear surfaced, he didn't dismiss it. One evening, as Matteo slept between them on the couch, Sofia spoke the question she'd been circling. "If this costs you everything, will you regret it?" Luca didn't answer right away. He watched his son's chest rise and fall, steady and strong. "I regret every moment I thought power was more important than this," he said. "I won't regret choosing him." Sofia nodded, tears slipping free. She rested her head against Luca's shoulder, something she hadn't done in years. The confrontation came 2 days later. Luca was alone when the knock came. It was late. The house was quiet. He knew who it would be before he opened the door. The man stood there without guards, without threats. Older now. Tired. Someone who had once helped Luca build everything he was walking away from. "You're making things difficult," the man said calmly. "I'm making them final," Luca replied. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the ordinary setting almost absurd. The man glanced toward the hallway. "You have a family now." "Yes." "That makes you vulnerable." Luca met his gaze. "It makes me finished with this." The man sighed. "You can't erase what you were." "I'm not trying to," Luca said. "I'm owning it. And I'm stopping." There was a long silence. Finally the man stood. "This is your last chance." Luca didn't follow him to the door. He stayed where he was, listening to the footsteps fade. Upstairs, Matteo cried. Luca was there in seconds, lifting him gently, murmuring reassurances. Matteo calmed quickly, cheek pressed against Luca's chest. Sophia watched from the doorway, heart in her throat. That night, Luca didn't sleep, neither did Sophia. Morning came anyway. No cars waited outside. No messages arrived. The house felt normal. Too normal. Elena called in the afternoon, just to check in. How's he doing? Laughing, Sophia said. He's laughing now. That's the best sound, Elena replied. Luca listened from across the room, Matteo gurgling happily in his arms. For a moment, everything felt possible. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Luca stood in the backyard. Matteo strapped against his chest, Sophia beside him. The city hummed in the distance, alive and indifferent. I don't know what tomorrow looks like, Luca said quietly. Sophia took his hand. Neither do I. Matteo made a soft, contented sound, fingers curling into Luca's shirt. But for the first time, uncertainty didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a door, and Luca Moretti was ready to walk through it without looking back. The door didn't slam shut behind Luca Moretti's past. It closed slowly, almost respectfully, as if even it understood what was being left behind. Weeks passed without incident, no envelopes, no parked cars, no subtle reminders. The absence was unsettling at first, like the ringing silence after a storm. Luca didn't trust it. He stayed alert, habits too deeply carved to erase overnight. But life didn't pause for his vigilance. Matteo grew. Not dramatically, not miraculously, just steadily, beautifully, undeniably alive. His cheeks filled out. His limbs grew stronger. His cries became demands instead of pleas. He developed a fascination with sounds: the rustle of fabric, the clink of a spoon, Sophia's voice when she sang under her breath while warming a bottle. The first time Matteo laughed properly, it caught Luca off guard. It happened in the kitchen, late afternoon light spilling across the floor. Sophia was making coffee, half listening to Luca talk about nothing important, when Matteo let out a sudden, breathless laugh at the sound of Luca's voice, dropping into a ridiculous imitation. They froze. Did you hear that? Sophia whispered, afraid to move. Luca stared down at his son, heart slamming against his ribs. Do it again, he murmured, like a plea. Matteo obliged, waving his arms, laughing harder this time. Sophia sank into a chair, covering her mouth as tears streamed freely. Luca laughed too quietly at first, then openly, the sound strange and unpracticed, like a muscle he'd never used before. That sound became a marker, a line between before and after. Elena visited more often now, not just to check on Matteo, but because she'd become part of their small, fragile world. She watched Luca carefully, not with suspicion anymore, but with measured respect. You're different, she said one evening as Sophia put Matteo to bed. I'm quieter, Luca replied. That too, Elena said, but mostly, you're listening. He nodded. I almost lost him because I didn't. Winter came gently, walks turned shorter, evenings grew longer. Sophia found herself relaxing in ways she hadn't allowed herself to before. She laughed more, slept deeper, trusted slowly, cautiously, but genuinely. One night, after Matteo finally fell asleep, Sophia sat beside Luca on the couch, their shoulders touching. I used to imagine this, she said softly. You, me, a child, normal problems. And now? Luca asked. Now I know normal isn't promised, she said. But this feels earned. He turned to her. Do you regret coming back? She shook her head. I regret that it almost cost him his life. I don't regret us finding our way here. Luca reached for her hand. This time she didn't hesitate. Spring brought a final reckoning. A letter arrived, not a threat, not a warning. An acknowledgement. It was brief, formal. It confirmed what Luca had already sensed. The organization had moved on. He folded the letter and placed it in the fire, watching it curl and disappear without ceremony. No triumph, no relief, just acceptance. That night, Luca stood at Matteo's crib long after Sophia fell asleep. He watched his son breathe, strong and even. A sound that had once terrified him now grounding him. I won't disappear, he whispered. Not again. Months later, at a routine checkup, the pediatrician smiled as she reviewed the chart. He's thriving, she said. You did everything right. Sophia squeezed Luca's hand. Elena, standing nearby, met his eyes and nodded once. Outside, Luca lifted Matteo into the sunlight. Matteo squinted, then smiled, wide and fearless. In that moment, Luca understood something with absolute clarity. Power had once defined him. Fear had once protected him, but love had rebuilt him, and it had started the moment a baby kept losing weight, until one nurse noticed what everyone else had overlooked. If this story moved you, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps these stories reach the hearts that need them most.